On guitar. It is a sign of recovery, a sign of renewing health, and we're proud that you're up leading worship on guitar for us again. And look who also wandered in to our midst today. Roxana Mollahan is here after... After a long journey. How about I put it that way? So we are pleased that you are here. Wow, excellent. Also pleased, Debbie Hugaboom is here. Debbie is someone, because I was out west Canada for so long, and she's really from East Canada, I knew her more by reputation. She is a career missionary, spending 25 years in Kenya, and another 10, was it, in Central Africa, and teaching, leading schools, all those missionary kind of activities that she was involved in. Yesterday she came to town, and so we were able to host her overnight at our place. I kept her up probably a little bit too late, asking all kinds of questions about Africa and life there and her work and her ministry. She's got lots of wisdom, and I'm glad that she's here to share with us, because this year is her retirement year. And she's visiting all the churches that have been such a support to her in her ministry, and this church, I'm proud to know, has supported her for a long time. Some even had gone over on a mission trip to visit her. And so we have that relationship and that connection with Debbie. So we're very glad Debbie is here. Welcome among us. We're having a potluck afterwards, so if you can stick around and visit, that's great too. So welcome, Debbie.
Set. Good to go. Sounds good.
We have sight line over there and everywhere. Excellent.
That's good. Well, I have to begin by saying, Bwana asifiwe. Praise the Lord. That's a common greeting in Kenya, walking down the street, and it really doesn't matter who you meet, whether you know them or you don't know them. That's what you say to them. That's how you greet them. You shake their hands, and you say, Bwana asifiwe. And the answer back is the same thing, Bwana asifiwe. And so that means praise the Lord, and what a wonderful, I'm just happy to be here. I don't know what to say. I love the Peterborough Church. I tried to think about how many times I've been here, and maybe this is my 5th time. About every 3 years, I would do my rounds, and this is my last round. My brother, some of you would know, Mike, calls it my victory tour, and I've had the opportunity to go as far west as BC, and as far north as St. Joseph Island. So, and it's funny, you know, when I was up there, they would keep talking about when they're going south. They're talking about Toronto. You know, we talk about south and we're talking about Florida, and they're talking about Toronto. But anyway, so I've had this opportunity to visit in churches, and I am almost finished. My touring is almost done. 1 month ago, in a couple of weeks, about 6 weeks ago, I moved to Kingston. That's where I grew up, was Kingston. For the last 20 years, I made my home when I was in Canada in Whitby with my sister, and she will continue to live in the house that we bought together, and I will move to Kingston, or have moved to Kingston. And I'm just praising God for helping me to find a place, because that was a real concern of mine. Trying to find accommodation is not easy. Nobody thought about the baby boomers, and I'm at the end of that generation, all needing a place to live when they retire. That just wasn't in anybody's mind, and so now there's a crunch for people looking for places to live. So I thank God that I have a place, and I'm so happy to be with you. And I just have to say, this is the victory part. Thank you so much, Peterborough Free Methodist Church, for your support, prayerful support, financial support, loving support. I know that I'm loved in this church. I want people come up to me and they, oh, you're here. We're so glad you're here. And that just warms me, you know. You don't know where you fit when you've lived out of the country for 33 years. And always when I would be home, I'd be home for 6 months, maybe up to a year, and then I'd be going back. And so I never thought of the longevity of actually being in Canada. You know, because Canada was a place to live for a little while and then leave. But now it's the place I'm living in, hoping I get to go back to Kenya, but I don't know when that's going to be. So I'm sort of happy to be home. I won't say that I'm entirely happy because it's a big adjustment. Retirement itself is an adjustment. People have told me that, of course, for years. And now that it's me, then I know I understand what people have been saying about retirement. But I retired from a culture, a country, all my friends, they're in Africa. And people say, well, do you still contact people? Well, of course I do. And it's nice to have social media. So anyway, thank you so very much. And for inviting me. I saw Pastor Daniel a couple months ago, no, 5 or 6 months ago, and he said, well, do you think you could come to Peterborough? And I said, I can, and it worked out, and here I am. So thank you so very, very much. In Kenya, or in Africa, I started out in Central Africa, as was mentioned. I lived and worked in the Democratic Republic of Congo, is what it is called now. When I was there, it was called Zaire. And it was a former colony of the Belgian. It was called the Belgian Congo. And so I lived there, and on one side of the main road, the Cape to Cairo Highway, it was called, because it started at Cairo in Egypt and wound itself all down through East Africa until it got to the Cape Town in South Africa. So it was a very long highway. I would say it's probably the longest in the world. How it got the name highway now is a little... That particular road from where I lived took 2 hours to go to the next mission station, which was Nundu, and it was 40 kilometers on a good day. If it had rained and the rivers had swollen, and we would have to drive through the rivers, and if the water was too high or moving too quickly, then we would just go back home and try the next day, or wait till later in the day till the water had subsided, and we would be able to drive through the river. And I actually did those kinds of things. Other occasions, we would have boards we always drove with boards on the top of our car, because in many places where you couldn't ford the river, there actually was a bridge, but there was no boards on the bridge, just the frame. And so you would put the boards down when you got to the river, put the boards down, drive across to the other side, then pick up the boards and put them back on the car. Because if you didn't take the boards with you when you went back to cross the bridge again on your way back home, the boards would be gone, because they would have taken the boards to use for firewood. So travel was interesting. 2 hours, 40 kilometers. So we had a sailboat. We're right on Lake Tanganyika, and if you look at any map of Africa, I think you might even see it in a world map, you can see this very long lake, and that's Lake Tanganyika. It's about 400 kilometers long. And on one side is Tanzania, to the north is Burundi, and to the south is Zambia. And so we had this sailboat because if it takes you 2 hours to go 40 kilometers, how do you get away fast? The lake is on one side and there's cliffs and mountains on the other side of the road. That's it. And so we had a sailboat because we could cross anywhere, go to any of the other countries, or at least out into the lake, should we need to evacuate. So we had a sailboat for the purpose of evacuation. But one particular day, we decided to use the boat. Actually, I said we, but it wasn't me who decided. Somebody else decided, and I got invited. Missionaries were going to go sailing on Lake Tanganyika. And so we met on the shore near a place called Nundu, and we were waiting to get into these small rowboats that would take us out to the sailboat, which had to be anchored some distance out because of the keel. It was a very deep keel, and so it couldn't come in close to shore. So we were in these going out to the sailboat in these little rowboats. And I said, "Are there life jackets?" And I was told, yes, there are life jackets. They're in the sailboat. So I said, okay. So along with everybody else, I got into the sailboat. And we get out to the sailboat, or I got in the rowboat. We get out to the sailboat. Now I have to demonstrate this. On the side of the sailboat was a rope ladder. I mean, we're talking about a big boat. Sorry. And I grab a hold of the rope ladder, put my leg up, and as I put my leg up and start to hoist myself up to get in onto the ladder and into the sailboat, my other leg is still in the rowboat. Now, if you know physics at all, and I didn't do well in physics, but anyway, I learned fast on this one. When I did this pushed the boat out, and there I was hanging in midair. And down I went. Straight into the lake. Now, I'm okay if I can touch bottom. But you can understand that I couldn't touch bottom at that point. And I went down. And all I could think of is the newspapers in Canada carrying the story, Canadian missionary drowns in Lake Tanganyika. I got up the first time, bobbed up, went to get the ladder again, I missed. Went down a second time. By then, the people on the shore and in the boat knew I couldn't swim. I come back up the next time. I was able to grab the ladder. Obviously, I got into the boat. I can identify with Peter in this story. I know what I'm going to get here. Is this the water? I can use the steps. Sorry, I'm fighting an infection. So, there. So here we are. Jesus has fed the 5,000. He tells the disciples to get into the boat. So they go out into the lake. Jesus stays behind to pray. And after he has prayed, he goes to join the disciples. I'm so sorry. And it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, I don't know about you, but we read the story, and we see the disciples and everyone saying, "Oh, it's a ghost," and they're afraid. And we think, those dumb disciples, they should have known it was Jesus. Am I right? My question is, how many of you have seen a ghost? And how many of you would not be afraid at 3 o'clock in the morning in the middle of the lake? See, they were just being normal people. They had never seen a ghost before. And they certainly weren't expecting Jesus to show up on the lake in the middle of the night, walking. So Jesus comes toward the boat, and Peter. So Jesus has said to them, "Don't be afraid." So Peter says, "If it's you, tell me to come." If it's you. Now, in Swahili, which is a language they speak in Kenya, if can be translated, the word kama means if or since. The same thing is true of Hebrew. Not Hebrew, Greek. If. Since it's you. So often we see it translated as if. If suggests doubt. Not really sure that it's you, but if it's you. But in this particular case, I think Peter is deferring to the since it's you. I don't think that Peter is going to trust anybody walking on the water at 3 o'clock in the morning that he's going to say, if it's you, with doubt in his mind, to say to him, come. I don't think so. I certainly wouldn't. And so Peter says to him, since it's you, tell me to come. And Jesus, come. That was it. Now I'm imagining, and every church, every place I go, students, it didn't matter, as I was teaching, there's always a Peter somewhere. Right? Everywhere. And you probably already have in your mind who the Peter is. I don't know who Peter is here. But you probably already have identified at least one person. And it can be a man or a woman. It doesn't have to be just a man just because the name's Peter. Okay? It can, let's say, Petera. I don't know. It can be a lady as well. And so, Peter's the impulsive guy. He speaks first, thinks later. Okay? So if it's you, since it's you, tell me to come. And Jesus says to him, come. Now I think the disciples are all shaking their head and they're going, oh no, there he goes again. Nothing new with this guy. He's the same guy, hasn't changed a bit. Because he's impulsive. He's constantly doing things. And so, what does it say? He doesn't even hesitate. It's like, let me out of here. I can't get out of here fast enough. Climbs out of the boat and down onto the water, and he begins to walk to where Jesus is. And I think, he's feeling pretty good. As he's walking, the disciples are going, oh my, what's he doing? Now, Peter, in his excitement of walking towards Jesus, doesn't really pay attention to his surroundings, his situation. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and the waves are coming up, and as Peter is walking, he notices the waves. And he really, maybe at this point, all of a sudden it dawns on him what he's done. He's in very unfamiliar territory. And as he notices the waves, he starts to sink. And then Peter resorts to, too often the way we are when we get into situations, oh, I better pray now. But his prayer is really, really short. He doesn't have time to have a big long prayer. And he says, Lord, save me. That's it. 4 words. And Jesus reaches out his hand and lifts Peter out of from below the water, moving him up till they're both standing on the water. And together they go to the boat and get into the boat. Now, Jesus, when they are together, after he's lifted him from the water, he says to Peter, why did you doubt? You of little faith, why did you doubt? Now, this is probably the verse that's the part of that passage of 11 verses or so that most preachers concentrate on. Am I right? How many of you have heard about Peter's doubt? Right? Peter shouldn't have doubted. I mean, Jesus was right there. He was okay. But do you know what I think? I don't think that Jesus was chastising Peter. I think it was more like a mother or a father, a parent, comforting their child. No parent, when their child is afraid, is going to chastise them. I said, oh, Peter, I was right there. You didn't need to be afraid. It's okay. I'm with you. I love, it just boggles my mind, and it should never do that, but it always does. When I'm in a worship service and I'm asked ahead of time, what's your scripture and what's your topic? And I was looking at the hymns that we sang, and I thought, how appropriate, this just fits in. And I was afraid Pastor Holly was going to do my sermon when she was talking to the kids. Isn't that amazing? Jesus, God is right there with us in all of our circumstances. You see, we get ourselves into circumstances and sometimes they take over our situation. We're overwhelmed by the situations that we get ourselves in. And too often, it's when we get overwhelmed by the circumstances, that's when we call on God. Instead of a constant daily walk with Him. Now, I don't know. That's sometimes the way things are. Sometimes the circumstances take precedent. And they overwhelm us. And this is normal. Our situations, and I loved it, Holly asked me, did I ever get out of my comfort zone? Were things ever always wonderful there? And I said, no. They weren't. There would be times when a plane would be flying over, and I'd say, I know right where my passport are, I can be packed in 5 minutes. Just land and take me out of here. Missionaries don't do that. Ever. Oh, they do. They do. The situation becomes so overwhelming sometimes. And so, when we get into these circumstances, there's only one place to look. And that's to Jesus. And that doesn't matter whether you're in Africa or in Asia or in Mexico. I understand you have ministries that you do there. Or in Canada. We live in a world where things are difficult sometimes. Prosperity gospel has really taken hold in so many places in Africa. It's no exception. And it's what people want to hear. That's what people want. Who doesn't want more cars and a bigger house and and all the things that go with modern society. Who doesn't want that? I don't think anybody would say, no, I don't want that. We want things to be nice, and there's nothing wrong with that. But life isn't always that way. Life is life, and we live in a fallen world, and there's sickness, and there's death. I feel like I've been touched this morning because I knew Bernice. And it's not easy. These things aren't easy in our lives. But that is life. That's the way things are. We can't escape it. But we have a better world ahead. That's the thing we look towards. Life isn't easy. And when my Kenyan friends would say, oh, God's going to heal you. God's going to do this. God's going to do that. You're going to, or these internet things just drive me nuts. I'm about ready to say, forget it with Facebook. Click on this and send to 30 people and you're going to be blessed. What in the world does that mean? I'm blessed. I'm blessed. God has blessed me with so much. But my Kenyan friends, they get all excited about all these things. And I say to them, all this stuff is wongo. It's a lie. It's not even scriptural. It's not in Scripture. So, we go through circumstances that are not easy. That's life. That's the way it is. There are 3 things that Peter did. He got out of the boat. How many disciples were in the boat? We can assume 12, if all the disciples were there. Okay, let's just assume that they were all there. But of the 12, only 1 got out of the boat. Peter. And as Peter has gotten out of the boat, he had to take a risk. The first thing about getting out of the boat, what it means to get out of the boat, is to take a risk. And that's why I thought, well, Holly, that's my sermon. Because getting out of the boat means getting out of your comfort zone. It means taking a risk. And Canadian culture is not a risk-taking culture. I don't think it ever has been. And when I was planning to go to Africa 33 years ago, you wouldn't believe the number of people who would say, well, aren't you afraid? Well, goodness, at that time I lived in Kingston. I was afraid to go to Toronto. I mean, it doesn't really matter where you live. There are things that can cause fear. And so, getting out of the boat means taking a risk. And when people would ask me, aren't you afraid? I'd say, it doesn't matter. Life is a risk. But we want to be comfortable. That was such a beautiful illustration. Man, I wish I'd known this one 8 months ago. I would have used it every church I was in. Life is a risk. Getting out of the boat is a risk. But we want to stay in our comfort zone. We want to stay in places that are comfortable. We don't have to worry about thinking about things, doing things that are unfamiliar to us. Am I right? What are the famous words in every church? Doesn't matter, board meetings, just general conversation. The board comes together and the pastor suggests something that's brand new, never been done before. You know where I'm going with this. And someone puts up their hand, or maybe they don't even wait till their hand's recognized. But it's never been done like that before. The last pastor we had didn't do it that way. Hasn't been done like this the church has been here for 150 years. We don't do things that way. And the idea is squashed. Because we don't want to get out of our comfort zone. Canada's a different place today, folks. I noticed it. I don't know if any of you have noticed, but I sure noticed it coming from a totally different culture. Back to my own culture. It's called reverse culture shock. And I'm looking and go, whoa. Things are different here. The way we are perceived as Christians is different. I'd have never imagined this 30 years ago when I went to Africa. Getting out of the boat means taking a risk. It means getting outside of your comfort zone. And if we're going to make an impact, we have to do things differently than we ever have before. I was talking to the pastor's family. We were talking last night over supper, and I mentioned I was in a church last 2 weeks ago, and I was staying at a bed and breakfast. And so at bed and breakfast, you all eat together, all the guests in the house. So we're having breakfast, and one couple who was there to see a play in that little town, and another couple had gone to see a stand-up comedian show, which they didn't like. And then we went around and said, well, where are you from, and who are you, and what are you here for? And so I said, well, I'm a retired missionary, and I'm here to preach. Kind of looked at me like, whoa, where'd she come from? A different planet. And so he said, oh, that's interesting. He said, so what are you going to talk about? And I said, well, I'm going to talk about the Bible. And that was a new thing for him too. And he said, well, okay. So I said, well, you know the story about Jesus walking on the water? Because I use the same message. Changed some things, but same message everywhere I go. And he said, oh, I don't know that story. That's unfamiliar to me. And I went, oh my goodness. I mean, that's a story. That's a classic story that most even we call secular people, know. It's not unfamiliar to most people. Jesus walking on the water. A lot of times it's used in derision of Jesus. Well, it couldn't have happened, and they make all kinds of... So I thought, no, this is indicative of what culture is like today. He didn't know the story of Jesus walking on water. Getting out of the boat means taking a risk. Doing things differently. We want everybody to be around us. We want our families to be around us. And one of the things that I appreciate my parents for is their support of me as a missionary. All my years. My mother was very wise. She was the first one I talked to when I was a young woman. And I said to my mom, Mom, what would you think if I became a missionary? And her first response was, I wouldn't like it, which didn't surprise me at all. But, and I like the word but, lakini in Swahili, but if that's what God wants you to do, you better do it. Wow. Those are pretty, and that was a long time ago. I remember it so well. If that's what God wants you to do, you better do it. And so, she accepted that I would be a missionary. My dad didn't say very much. But my dad was the one when it came to pack up my stuff and put it in a trailer to be shipped to Africa. He helped me. He helped me pack my stuff. He thought I lived in a grass hut in the middle of nowhere. And in 1995, he came to see me. And he was quite surprised that I had running water and electricity. Now, that wasn't always the case that I would have electricity, but in Kenya I did. And but my parents were always very supportive of me. I knew a missionary couple that went to the field, and they had to leave because the mother wanted the children home. She said, I don't want them so far away. And I said to her once, I said to the mother one time, so you'd rather have your children living next to you or close to you? I said, what if your children were not even following Jesus but lived next to you? Would that be better for you? She thought. I don't know if she answered. Wow. You see, right now, we have I call it a crisis. I don't know. Maybe I'm blowing it out of proportion. I don't know. But I think it's a crisis in Canada. Right now, as I speak, there are zero Free Methodist missionaries serving with the Free Methodist Church in Canada on a foreign field. Zero. Not a single missionary. And there's none in the foreseeable future. What happened? At one time, there were more Canadians in Africa, Canadian Free Methodist missionaries, than there were American Free Methodist missionaries. We were two-thirds of the mission force were Canadian. And now we have nobody in the world, in any country, doing anything. There are missionaries that are Free Methodists that are working with other organizations. Don't get me wrong, there are Free Methodists, but they're not being sent by the Free Methodist Church to work in Free Methodist ministries around the world. What has happened? That's a reality. And there's something that needs to be done. I don't know what to do. I'm ready to do something. See, maybe after I finish my victory tour, I'll start making the rounds as I start recruiting missionaries. Then I have to get back to the other agency here in Canada and say, okay, let's send them. But I think, this is my theory, I think part of it is this not wanting to take a risk and not getting out of your comfort zone. What about pastors? There aren't young men and women who are being called into the ministry. I'm lying. There are. But they're not heeding that call. Because we want to be comfortable. Parents don't want their kids to be missionaries. They don't want their kids to be pastors and work in church ministries because they're not going to be bringing in the big bucks. And what about your security in your old age? And what about, and what about, and what about? Is this true? Boy, it got quiet in here. But I don't know if I'm on the right track or not, but I suspect it at least has something to do with what the situation is right now. Because I don't think God has stopped calling people to ministry. I'm 100% that He has not. But why aren't people answering? Because they want to sit in the comfort area. And I love the illustration of them all doing things. And that's what ministry is. Life wasn't easy. I remember my first week in Congo. First week. I've just moved in. I have a little tiny apartment. I mean, it's tiny, but I didn't have a lot of stuff. It didn't matter. And I remember sitting on the floor with all my stuff, and I'm thinking, now, what do I do? Where am I going to put this stuff? There's no place to put it. The apartment wasn't finished. So now what do I do? And then I started to cry. Now, it wasn't because I didn't have a place to put it. However, I began to realize what I'd just done. I'd only been there a week. And I go, oh, what am I going to do? I've got 6 more months to go. I just arrived. God has a sense of humor. Just try it. Try him on that sense of humor. He'll show you his humor. That 6 months turned to 18 months in DRC, in Zaire. And that 18 months turned out to 33 years in Africa. My first week I sat and cried. What am I doing here? I'm so far away from home. To get out of the boat means to take a risk. I didn't know anybody. Another thing about a sense of humor, I barely passed French in high school. Barely passed French. Where did I go to serve? A French-speaking country. And they didn't know English. I had to use French. I taught in French. I marked papers in French. Isn't that amazing? There's no excuses, by the way. When you say yes, you're jumping out of the boat, and God enables you to do things you never thought were imaginable. That's why I love this illustration of these kids playing with the ball and eating candy. And so often we're on the sidelines in our comfort zone watching the world go by. Wow. Getting out of the boat means taking a risk. Getting out of the boat means trusting God. Getting out of the boat means trusting God. Do you trust Him? We say we do. Now, this one's a really short thing because it leads really fast to the last one. Getting out of the boat means taking a risk. Getting out of the boat means trusting God. I mean, Peter had to trust Jesus if he was going to walk on that water. Getting out of the boat means obeying. It means following through with what He has called you to do. I don't swim. Obviously, I don't swim. And I could stand and look at the water. I remember, standing at a cottage what my dad would rent in the summertime and stand at the end of the diving board. And someone would be at the, down below waiting for me to jump. I don't think I ever did. I was terrified because I knew I was going to go underwater. Taking a risk, trusting, obeying. It means following through the trust. Yes, I trust God, but don't send me anywhere that I don't know how things are going to go. Don't take me out of my comfort zone. Don't make me do something that I've never done before. Don't make me learn a new language. I mean, there are so many things that it could be. Getting out of the boat means taking a risk. Getting out of the boat means trusting. Getting out of the boat means acting, doing, obeying what it is God is calling you to do. What is God been calling you to do? I'm not going to say that He's doing it right now. It could be that over a period of time, God has been speaking to you and saying, there are things that I want you to do. And you've been saying, oh, I can't do that. And we're like Tommy. What was his name? We're like Tommy sitting there and while everybody's participating. That's the way most churches are, by the way. You have the participants and you have the activists. Well, they're not activists, but in that sense, they're doing something. And this is September. It's the beginning of the new church year, kind of. All the programs get going, right? And I heard some announcements. You must have heard them too. About people needed for different things. Could God be speaking to you about any of those? And you say, oh, I can't do that. I can't work with youth. I can't work with kids. I don't want to be involved in Bible studies. No, I can't do that. Get out of the boat. God might be speaking to you as an individual to get out of the boat. God might be speaking to you as a church. What is He asking the church to do? Heaven forbid that it be something that we haven't done before. What is needed in the community around the church, in the community of Peterborough, that this church could do? Right now, in Ottawa, the church that my brother pastors was hit by a tornado yesterday. Took off a third of the roof in the fellowship hall. When they met for church as well, I cried this morning. I cried as I was reading it. When they met for church this morning, they didn't have a church service. They could have gone into the sanctuary, I believe. They met outside to pray, and then they were dispersing into the community to help clean up the mess. Trees falling down everywhere. And all kinds of stuff. There's no water. Cold. Starting to get cold. And I thought, what? No church service? No, I didn't think that. Because the church, the people there, they don't need a church service. The people in the community need someone to come alongside with them and help them in their grief. Because some of them have lost everything. What is God calling the Peterborough Free Methodist Church to do that people have been digging in their heels and saying, well, we can't do that. We've never done it before. Getting out of the boat means taking a risk. Getting out of the boat means trusting God. Getting out of the boat means action, obeying, doing what God has asked you to do. May God bless you today. May God bless you.